All right, let's imagine ancient Britain.
Mm-hmm.
The Roman Empire is expanding, right?
Mm-hmm.
Making their presence known. And not everyone's happy about it.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, one queen decides, you know what? I'm going to do something about this. And her name, Boudica.
Boudica. Now that is a name that echoes through history. Rebellion, battles, a queen facing off against one of the mightiest empires ever.
Exactly. So today, we're diving deep into this rebellion of hers back in 61 AD.
Okay.
It still fascinates us today, almost 2,000 years later. What made her a legend? What can we learn from this? To get into all that, we're going to be using excerpts from Boudica's Wikipedia page,
Okay.
which pulls from accounts by Roman historians, Cassius Dio.
Right. And it's important to keep in mind those are Roman perspectives. So it's, a window into those events. But got to remember, there's always more than one side to the story.
Absolutely. So before we get into the rebellion itself, let's set the scene. Roman Britain, 1st century AD, a mix of cultures, ambitions, and, tensions brewing.
Oh, yeah. The Romans had their sights set on Britain for a while. Resources, location, strategically, it made sense. But it wasn't an easy takeover, was it?
No, not at all. They're facing resistance from various Celtic tribes, each with their own traditions, ways of life.
Absolutely.
And among them, Boudica's people, the Iceni. Now, these weren't just, everyday folks resisting. The Iceni, they had a sophisticated culture. They were minting their own coins.
Wow.
Which back then was a big deal. It showed organization, independence. Rome probably found that a little intimidating.
Yeah. They had their own king, Boudica, and at first things seemed, relatively stable under Roman rule. They had a certain degree of autonomy. But that stability, as we know, it was kind of built on shaky ground.
It was. And then things take a turn. Boudica, when he dies, he's trying to think ahead, secure his family, his people's future. He leaves his kingdom jointly to his daughters.
Okay.
And to the Roman emperor. You'd think that would keep everyone happy, appease Rome.
Right. You would think it'd be a pretty smart move. Acknowledge Roman power while preserving, the Iceni heritage.
A calculated move.
Yeah.
But Rome, as we know, wasn't exactly known for being generous or respecting local custom.
No, they were not.
So, miscalculation. Big time. Because Rome sees this as a chance to just take the whole kingdom, ignore the will, annex the territory, start treating the Iceni like, conquered subjects, not a recipe for peace and harmony.
No. Imagine the resentment building up, right? You're the Iceni, you see your leaders disregarded, land taken, your whole way of life under threat. It's an attack on your identity, your future.
Absolutely. And Rome doesn't stop at the land grab. According to Tacitus, things get really personal. Boudica herself is publicly flogged.
Oh, wow.
A humiliating spectacle meant to crush her, make an example of her to anyone else thinking about defying Rome.
It's a chilling detail, and whether or not it happened exactly as Tacitus described it, it really shows us those power dynamics at play. Rome wanted to be in control, and they weren't afraid to use violence, humiliation to make that point.
Yeah. But here's the thing about humiliation, about oppression. It can backfire.
Oh, yeah.
Big time.
Mm-hmm.
And in this case, it lit a fire in Boudica, one that would consume Roman settlements, shake the very foundations of their rule in Britain.
Absolutely. It wasn't just about land anymore. This was personal. This was about dignity.
Yeah.
And Boudica, fueled by that outrage and grief, she wasn't going to let them get away with it. This is where her story truly begins.
It does. From humiliated queen to a warrior leading a rebellion. What a transformation. And we're just getting started. Stick with us as we explore how Boudica's fury explodes, turning that resentment into a full-blown uprising.
Yeah, it's going to be amazing.
So we left off with Boudica, flogged, furious, watching Rome just trample over her people, their traditions, humiliated, her daughters violated, kingdom stolen. But she didn't crumble. She did something incredible.
She rose. And not alone, right? She tapped into this well of resentment that had been building among the Britons for years, brought together tribes that had never joined forces before, this powerful alliance against a common enemy.
Imagine that. Different tribes, rivalries, histories, and Boudica unites them. That's leadership. This wasn't just an Iceni rebellion anymore. This was a challenge to Rome's power in Britain.
It really was. Her name, Boudica, it means victorious woman. That resonated with people longing for freedom from Rome. She became a symbol of defiance.
And they were ready to fight. This rebel army, it was massive. Dio even says it swelled to 230,000 at its peak. Can you picture that? A sea of warriors' chariots, all fueled by this burning desire for vengeance, for freedom.
Yeah, it's hard to even fathom. And their first target, Camulodunum. Roman settlement, packed with symbolism.
Oh, yeah.
It housed a temple to the Emperor Claudius himself, a figurehead of Roman power.
Attacking Camulodyna was a direct hit at that Roman arrogance. Like they were saying, we will not be subjugated, we will take back what is ours.
And they did. They stormed the settlement, left very little standing. The Temple of Claudius, meant to inspire awe, obedience, it ironically became this last desperate refuge for Roman citizens trying to escape the fury of the rebellion.
Wow. And from there, Boudica sets her sights on Londinium, modern-day London. Back then, bustling commercial center, Roman economic power.
The Roman governor, Gaius Suetonius Paulinus, he had a tough choice. His forces, completely outnumbered, defending Londinium seemed impossible.
Yeah, what do you do?
Exactly.
So he makes the strategic decision, abandon the city. Must have been a bitter pill to swallow to watch Londinium fall to the rebels.
But it was a calculated risk. Direct confrontation at that point, disastrous. He needed to pick his battles.
Londinium burns, and Boudica's not done. They move on to Verulamium, another major Roman settlement. 3 major Roman centers, ashes. The message was clear. Rome's grip on Britain slipping.
And the accounts from Tacitus and Dio, even though it's a Roman perspective, they don't shy away from the brutality. Casualties on both sides, immense.
It's a reminder that these weren't just, events in a history book. These were real people. Fighting, dying, the violence of those times, shocking. But despite those early victories, the rebels, they're up against a formidable opponent in Suetonius Paulinus.
Oh, yeah. Seasoned military commander, known for his strategic brilliance.
He knew facing Boudica's forces head-on was, it was suicide. He had to even the odds, find a battlefield that played to Roman strengths.
And he did. Paulinus chose a narrow defile, a valley, woods on either side, limiting the Britons' ability to maneuver their larger force. Classic Roman tactic. Discipline, strategy over just brute force.
It was a gamble. Big gamble. But it paid off. The Britons funneled into this defile, facing the full might of the Roman legions.
Those legions outnumbered, but they were a machine. Shields interlocked, a wall of steel, javelins raining down, disrupting that British charge. Then the close combat.
Just try to imagine the chaos, the carnage. The Britons, fueled by this righteous fury, charging those disciplined lines, metal against metal, screams of the wounded.
Brutal.
The ground soaked in blood.
They fought bravely, but they were outmatched. Roman discipline, training, their weaponry took a heavy toll.
It was a decisive and brutal defeat. Boudica's rebellion, it had burned so brightly, extinguished in all that blood and Roman steel.
But what about Boudica herself? What happened to the warrior queen who dared to defy Rome? That's a story for our final act.
So Boudica's rebellion, crushed. But her story doesn't end there, does it? What happened to the warrior queen after that defeat? Capture, escape. It's kind of a mystery, and that just adds to her legend.
Yeah, the exact details of her fate, they're lost to time. But we do have those accounts from Tacitus and Dio, each offering their own version. Tacitus, always one for the drama, claims Boudica chose a defiant exit, poisoning herself rather than being, a Roman trophy.
Wow, powerful image, right. Refusing to submit, even in defeat. Taking control. It's easy to see why that version of her story has really stuck with people.
It has. But Dio, writing much later, he suggests something a bit less dramatic, maybe more realistic. He says she died of illness, possibly from wounds or, disease spreading after such a massive conflict, which makes sense.
It does. So who's closer to the truth? We may never know for sure.
Yeah.
But even in death, Boudica remained this symbol of resistance. It didn't end on that battlefield.
No, it didn't. And her legacy, shaped by those accounts, but also by how people have reimagined her story over the centuries. She's been a symbol for so many, from English nationalists to the suffragettes fighting for women's rights.
Think about it. This Celtic queen who stood up to Rome. It's a story that speaks to something, universal. The courage to fight for what you believe in, even when the odds are stacked against you. It's no wonder her story has resonated across cultures, time.
It is. And even her name. The Romanized Boudicca became more common, but her true name, Boudica, meant victory in her Celtic language. Even in how she's remembered, you see that clash between conqueror and conquered, the struggle over who gets to shape history.
It's a reminder that history is rarely simple. It's perspectives, interpretations, and sometimes a little bit of mythology mixed in. When we're looking at the past, we're dealing with fragments, pieces of a puzzle that we may never fully complete.
Yeah, and that's part of what makes it so fascinating, right? Piecing together those fragments, analyzing sources, considering those different viewpoints, and through that, we gain a deeper understanding not just of the past, but of ourselves.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Boudica's world, what can we take away? Hero, villain, Victim of circumstance. It's probably a bit of all of those things.
I think so. Her story challenges us to think critically, to question the narratives we've been given, recognize how complex the past really is.
It reminds us that history is not just dates and names. It's the triumphs, the tragedies of those who came before us.
And maybe most importantly, Boudica's story shows us that even when facing overwhelming power, the human spirit, that desire for freedom, it can never be truly conquered.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Boudica's world. We hope you enjoyed it. What resonated with you? What questions are you left with? Let us know.
Thank you for listening. If you love history, don't forget to subscribe to History with Bree and Peter. Join us for more fascinating stories from the past. Hit that subscribe button and never miss an episode.